The Roman Empire lasted for over 1,000 years, reached over 3 continents at its height, and controlled lands from Africa to the island of England, or as the Romans would come to call it, Britannia. The Roman Empire first made landfall on British soil in the year 55 BC. 2 Roman legions of 10,000 men set sail from the now French port city of Boulogne, under command of the Roman general Julius Caesar. They sailed across the English Channel to Dover, where, to the surprise of the Romans, there was a large force of Celts waiting to meet them. The Romans decided to go up the coast and land in Kent instead of facing the large Celtic force at Dover. The Celts, seeing the Romans change course, followed them up to Kent, where the Romans were forced to disembark from their ships in the water and fought the Celts wading up to the beach. The Romans managed to gain a few victories before returning to Gaul. Just a year later, they would return with 5 legions, totaling 30,000 men, and learning from his previous mistakes, Caesar would bring 2,000 cavalrymen as well, and took the Celts by surprise. They swept up southern England and won battle after battle. The Celts at that time were a warring group of petty kings and tribes, making it easy for the Romans to take advantage of this divided nature and conquer them one by one. Many Celtic tribes resorted to paying tribute to Caesar in return for safety and protection. Eventually, Caesar was forced to return to fight in Gaul. This would end the Roman occupation of Britain for almost a century. Until 43 AD, when Emperor Claudius would launch the last Roman invasion of Britannia. The invasion of Britain, ordered by Claudius, was undertaken to prove to the Roman people that he was a true Roman emperor, through the time-honored tradition of conquest. It is also speculated that the Romans were in need of resources, such as slaves and metals. Emperor Claudius sent General Aulus Plautius and 4 legions with the same number of auxilia to Britain, totaling 50,000 men. They would split into 3 divisions. The Romans swept through southeast Britain, eventually occupying the southern half of Britain up to the border of Scotland for the next 400 years. To many of you watching, the occupation of your land by a foreign power may sound bad, but for many Britons, like people all across Europe, would welcome the Roman annexation. The Roman Empire brought desirable goods and stable governance. The Romans built cities larger and more advanced than anything seen in Britain before. They brought their complex infrastructure and highway system, and most importantly, they united the warring tribes and kingdoms under the central authority of the Roman Empire, ending the many wars and frequent battles fought between the Britons. They would greatly increase the standard of living in Britannia. Roman occupation brought trade with the wider Roman Empire, bringing Britain into the Mediterranean economy and bringing prosperity to Britain. Britain began to adopt Latin as the standard language, and many new Britannian cities were built in the style of Roman cities, with public squares and buildings, governmental districts, and Roman bathhouses. By the time of Emperor Hadrian, 117 to 138 AD, Britons, under Roman rule, considered themselves Romans, living on Roman land. The Britons lived like most Western Roman provinces in the empire. Life in Britannia was fairly peaceful aside from periodic raids along the border provinces from the northern tribes. Eventually, Emperor Hadrian would build a wall along the northern border to keep the raiding tribes at bay and stabilize the region. The wall, known as Hadrian's Wall, still stands today in some parts of northern England, and became the northernmost barrier between the civilized world of Rome and the barbarians. For the next 400 years, the Roman Empire governed Britannia, with provincial authorities managing their districts from governmental complexes under the authority of Roman Britannian capital of London. The Roman government had mostly reformed Britons into Roman culture and law. The average Roman Britannian citizen would be of Celtic or Britannian descent, and may have kept some semblance of their former culture, but mostly lived like a normal Roman citizen, following the teachings of Christianity and speaking Latin. Most citizens had distanced themselves from the northern tribes and thought them to be savage barbarians. Some citizens would even indulge in the great Roman games, like the ones in the famous Colosseum of Rome. Some Britannian arenas were even constructed to resemble the famous Roman Colosseum. The age of Roman rule in Britannia began to crumble in the early 4th century, under the pressure from northern Britannian tribes and Germanic barbarians in Italy. The Roman army had been all but recalled to defend continental Rome from Germanic invasion and could no longer dedicate resources to defend Britannia. By the early 5th century, Rome had completely abandoned the province of Britannia, and it began to be fully overrun by the Anglo-Saxons. They eventually managed to conquer most of Roman Britannia, and by the 6th century, forming the early kingdoms of England, thus ending Roman rule of Britannia and plunging the island into a light, dark age of its own. Eventually, the great Roman cities would be abandoned and crumble with time. The Anglo-Saxons' rule would lead to the loss of most Roman knowledge of city planning and infrastructure, thus making the newer English cities centuries behind the old Roman ones, with their technology and armies equally inferior. This led to an almost mythological status of the Roman Empire in the mind of Anglo-Saxons after the empire's collapse, many treating Roman artifacts and ruins like that of an ancient alien society, far beyond their own understanding. The Roman Empire would all but fade into obscurity in England until the early Middle Ages, where kings would claim to be descendants of Roman empires or high-ranking officials to gain renown and influence, or stake claim to territory. But to the common Englishman, the glory of the Roman Empire had long since passed, fading into legend of a grand golden age, that of Britannia.